Hello everyone, this is Mike again, and I am the co-founder of the Wanda Pratnicka Center. In the 3 last episodes, we have spoken a lot about spirit attachment, and I have received questions concerning that information and will try to answer it today. So the first question comes from Frank in Sydney, in Australia, who asks me, you mentioned that many people have spirit attachments and that most aren't even aware of it. I always thought spirit attachment was rare. In movies it is portrayed as extreme, people stumbling around, acting possessed. Can you explain why you believe that it's actually more common? Well, you need to separate the goals of Hollywood and the daily life. Horror movies like The Exorcist, for example, is a movie that has the aim to scare people as much as only possible. That aim is being fulfilled in the movie, but it has nothing to do with reality. So the makers of the movie, they have just set a screenplay and tried to make it as much horrible as only possible. So exorcisms and the possession itself is a completely different subject. So do not take care what you have seen in this movie. Do not take care for what you see in horror movies. On our website there is a list of movies that you can watch which are picturing the phenomenon of possession in the right way. That way you can have a lot of information about spirits in a movie form. The next question is, you said it's the soul that decides whether to transition to the other side or not. I always thought God decides, letting us if we're good or rejecting us if we're bad. Can you clarify how this works? And this question comes from Molly. When we were born as human beings, God gave us an individual soul, and additionally to that individual soul, He gave us the free will. The free will means that you can choose whatever you decide. You can do the right thing, meaning in compliance with love, or you can do the wrong thing, meaning going after the fear. And only on our decision it depends what is going to happen to us here on earth, but also on the other side. Speaking it in a different way, you are going to get a life after the death of your physical body that you have chosen during your lifetime. And that is just a continuation of your life that you had before. You will have very similar experiences and you will have very similar situations around you, people around you, energy around you. Because your mental and emotional record of what you did during your lifetime is then like a matrix that is defining your world afterwards. The next question is, you talked about karma as a learning experience. Does that mean experiencing spirits could also be part of karma? Could it be that I possessed someone in the past and now I'm being possessed as a result? And the question comes from Svetlana in New York. Okay, so the constellation in which we have possessed someone in the past and we are now in the situation where you are playing that same role, so to speak, is rather rare. So the karma will of course determine our life after the death of the physical body. And that is a little bit more explanation to the previous question. If you have attached yourself to negativity, for example, then you will go through a lot of negativity in the emotional world, meaning the world that you're coming into when your physical body is gone. And there you will also experience maybe the greatest joy if your life on earth had the purpose to do the good, to act according love and not according to fear. So in that sense, karma is just the sum of all the experiences that we have decided to get into when we have been still on earth. The same applies to the physical life. When you incarnate to earth, you are coming in very, very similar circumstances. You have very, very similar people around you. You will have very, very similar constellation of your finances and your knowledge and your education as in the last incarnation. Because the life after the incarnation is just like a continuation of what was happening before. And here again, karma is deciding what experiences should you be in the new incarnation. The situation concerning your sex or smaller things like how you are going to look like may differ. So you may be wealthier or not, you may be pretty or not. The soul or the higher self who is making the plan for your incarnation is just setting things according to what is the best experience right now that you could go through in order to grow as much as possible. Because evolution has the aim to develop your soul as much as only possible in one incarnation. Of course, we have had many incarnations before, but the higher self and our soul always decides which experiences we are going to have on earth. And the soul is being asked, what do you think about such and such experiences the higher self is planning for you? And you can say, yes, I want difficult experiences, or you can say, okay, I want experiences that I will be able to fulfill. Sometimes we are choosing unwisely and we are taking too much experiences on us. And then our incarnation is very difficult, so it is much better to choose a incarnation that is offered to us by our higher self. Another question that I have received is, I am addicted to cigarettes and I have tried to quit many times without success. You mentioned that people with addictions might not transition to the other side of death. How could my addiction affect me after I pass away? And that comes from Manuel from Puerto Rico. Well, Manuel, the addiction to anything in our world is a great difficulty for every human being, especially when that person is passing away to the other side. The reason for that is that we have had addictions here which are mostly of a physical nature. And we just are unable to receive these experiences of using, for example, cigarettes or alcohol on the other side, because this is a completely different vibrational level. There is no such thing as cigarette and there is no such thing as alcohol. So it is very important to watch your habits, because out of habits the addictions are originating. If you have good control of your habits, then you will be able not to let certain habits come into life, and you will be able to just avoid things that might be very dangerous for you and very unpleasant, very painful after you have gone to the other side. The problem is originating from the fact that every human being who is addicted to anything, could be everything, is then trying to get the addiction fulfilled. Because the push from your desire body is very intense to fulfill the addiction. And therefore you are being pushed, and that push may be stronger than your ability to resist. So the strength and intensity of that desire is going to determine our life after the death of the physical body. The other issue here is that you are addicted to cigarettes and you have tried to quit many times. There might be a spirit around you or even within you who is just trying to fulfill its addiction through you. It is very difficult for the human body to deal with substances that are just poisoning your physical body, like cigarettes, like drugs, like alcohol, and so on and so on. So you should consider to ask our team to see whether there are spirits And the last question for today is, can you explain again what the emotional body is? You've mentioned it several times, but I'm still confused about what it means. Yes, and this is a very natural thing to be confused about the emotional body and about the emotional world, because the emotional body is a very, very complex being, and you can really call it being because you give life to that emotional being by deciding what emotions you are allowing to decide about, because it is your decision on what emotions you are going to draw from the emotional field of humanity. You can decide to attract only positivity like enthusiasm or joy or love, or you can decide to be angry about this world, which is the case for most cases in our world today. Very sad, but very true. So people are very often fearful about life, about other people, about themselves, about situations, about challenges, and then they are just going with their energy into the fields of fear. And fear is only the origin of anger. And if you are often angry, then you will attract energies from the emotional world that have the same vibration. So if you decide to be often angry, you will attract anger from the emotional world. And at the same time, you are going to attract spirits from the emotional world who are as angry as yourself. And only spirits will come who have exactly that same anger as you do. So they are not going to be angry about their partner. If you are angry about your boss, you will only attract people who were during their lifetimes angry about authority, about politicians, and so on and so on. So depending on your specific anger, you will attract only spirits with exactly the same kind of anger. This makes it very hard to recognize whether this is still yourself, if this is your own anger, or if this is someone else's anger, because the anger that the spirit comes to you with is exactly of that same kind, but very, very, very intense. In the beginning, it might not seem very, very intense because the spirit is in a certain distance to your emotional body. But the more you are giving way to anger, the more you are going to attract the spirit. And if the spirit comes, it is going to be more and more intense, but you still may have very difficult time in understanding, is this your own anger or is this someone else who is just projecting that energy on you? The emotional body is, so to speak, a seed of all the emotions you can have. You can have negative emotions, you can have anger, for example, but you can also have positive emotions like sympathy or the need or desire to help others, to give yourself to others. The emotional body is also the seed of your desires. We can desire different things. We can desire positive things, we can desire negative things. It all depends on us. That's the free will that we are just applying here. So depending on what direction you are going, you will always be pushed into having more and more and more of the same kind. So what you are giving on the outside is just coming back to you multiplied. If you give anger, then hate will come. If you give sympathy, finally love will come. And that is how we are at the steering wheel. We are deciding everything. But that needs to be governed all the time. This consciousness you need to work out. You need to get more and more and more into things that you know are positive in nature. So the emotional body itself is, as I said, very, very complex being, and we unfortunately have not the time here during such a podcast to speak about it more. So that is why I will say goodbye for today, and I am wishing you all the best there is, namely love. Thank you.